Hey, what's going on, YouTube? Hope you guys are doing well out there. I just want to first start off and say thank you guys so much for, always showing me love and support. And shout out to all my subscribers. I know that, in the grand scheme of things in the YouTube world, 8,000 subscribers isn't that much at all. But I never forget, you know, anybody who hits that subscribe button, it's another human being that's watching my video. Somebody, who's also on this crazy journey we call life, who also has a unique story, so I never forget that. So thank you guys so much. And if you haven't subscribed, I would go ahead and hit that subscribe button because I got a lot of awesome content coming out. All right, so let's get into today's video. So, I just want to first start off and say that, it is more important than ever. It is imperative that we always seek the truth, because there's so much, misinformation being thrown at us, information with an agenda behind it. And, seeking the truth is more important than ever. It helps, the truth will help us make better decisions for our future and for the direction of our country. Because not too long ago, we were told that there's a certain list, and on this list it names, a lot of rich, famous, elite people that visited a certain destination, that did a lot of evil and things you can't even imagine to underage, teenage, boys and girls. And I was so hopeful. I was like, yes, finally, let's go. Let's bring these people to justice, and let's, bring an end to all this corruption. But then what were we told shortly thereafter? What list? It was just all a hoax. And, the list doesn't even exist now. And you have another group of people, that come here for, well, a majority of them come here for a better life, but they're being hunted like animals, but this group, absolutely nothing's going to happen to them. So, and I'm really sorry. I used to be one of the people that thought if you're, if you came here legally, you shouldn't be here because it's unfair to the people that did come here legally. But if the law doesn't apply to this group, it shouldn't apply to this group as well. So welcome to the United States. I'm just, the hypocrisy makes me just so angry. And on top of that, we were also told, that we're going to balance the budget. We're going to cut, our country is in massive debt. We're going to cut the debt, cut wasteful government spending. But I haven't heard anything about Doge in like the last 1 or 2 months. Whatever happened to that? And on top of that, I remember we were told that, all wars are going to end. And, on day one, but yet here we are, bombing, certain specific sites, to a country in the Middle East. And how can we be certain that that's all they're doing? I have no way. I don't think the average American, really knows what's going on. We're just being told, hey, we just hit a specific site. That was it. But how do we really, really know that that is what happened? And what I'm trying to say is that these are the people that are telling us that inflation is only 2.7%. That from May, it was 2.4%. But in the month of June, the Bureau of Labor Statistics says that the inflation rate only ticked up 0.3% to 2.7%. But if you look at with your own eyes, you know that that's not the case. And if you look further into the report, which I have right here, I'm even seeing that inflation is starting to become a problem again. So according to the report, eggs year over year, it's up 27.3%. Roasted coffee, and I know a lot of us drink coffee, it's up 12.7%. Uncooked beef steaks, I love steaks, but it's up 12.4% year over year. Chewing gum, 8%. Other foods away from home, it's up 4.6%. And I see it with my own eyes. I don't want to admit it, but I love McDonald's, and I get the McBiscuit, hash browns, and a coffee almost every morning. And it was around 5.41, and now just a couple days ago or last week, it jumped up to 6.20. And college textbooks, I think, which are a ripoff, but they're up 10.2% year over year. Motor vehicle insurance is up 6.1%, and I can even see my own insurance going up. I used to pay about 185 a month, but it jumped up to 192 just starting last month. And I've been in 0 accidents, 0 speeding tickets in the last 10 years. Tuition for daycare, I know a lot of people send their kids to daycare, that's up 5.5%. And something that affects us all, utilities, is up 14.2%. So as you guys can see, inflation is starting to go back up and become a problem again. And, I just want to warn you guys that it's going to get a lot worse. For the first time in our country's history, the interest that we pay on the national debt, which is at around $37 to $38 trillion, is the number one expenditure, that the U.S. government pays. That's more than the federal, our military budget, as well as the entitlements that we pay to United States citizens. And I believe that the only way that we can, that the government can make these payments is by printing more and more money by the Federal Reserve Bank. And when, throughout history, when we see the Federal Reserve, print more money and put it into circulation, inflation always explodes and goes a lot higher. So guys, I just want to warn you guys that inflation is going to be a bigger problem down the road. And I did receive some comments, Def, it seems like, a lot of the things you talk about are doom and gloom. But, I tell it like it is, and I believe that our country's already in, a deep recession or a depression. And I believe the data, shows that the economy isn't doing so well. So according to the Federal Reserve economic data, the number of multiple job holders jumped 282,000 for the month of June 2025. And our country currently has the most multiple job holders ever in its history, with 8.87 million Americans having to work multiple jobs just to stay afloat and just to be able to, afford the cost of living. How sad is that you have to work multiple jobs, and these people are never going to be able to get ahead in life. Though, to me, that's a depression. And another really shocking statistics that I saw that really made me pretty sad was there are 1.2 million girls between the ages of 18 to 24 that are on OnlyFans. And, I don't know why that they're on there. I just, maybe because, it's easy money. I'm not really too sure. But, I think it's also because a lot of young people are losing hope. 58% of recent college graduates can't find jobs. And if you just look on social media, there are tons and tons of young people just, making TikToks and YouTube shorts, filming themselves about how hard life is, and they just want to give up. And to me, that's a depression. Our country's in, a very bad place right now. And, I should have said this a little earlier, but, I'm not talking to the people that are doing well, the people that made good choices in life, that worked hard in high school, that went to college, who became doctors, lawyers, engineers, accountants. Those people are doing better than ever, and it's much deserved. They worked hard all their lives, they made the right decision. And those people that are in that tier, they're doing better than ever because asset prices are going up. They're maxing out their 401ks. They own homes or multiple homes. So that group of people, are doing very well, but I'm talking to the 3 out of 5 Americans that are working paycheck to paycheck, and the 60% that have less than $1,000 saved. Because there's this ratio. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, you're essentially living on a 1-to-1 ratio, basically meaning that if your expenses are $1,000, the money that you're bringing in is around $1,000, hence why you're living paycheck to paycheck. And if you don't make the necessary changes now, such as cutting back expenses, or planning your life where you can make more income and better your life, inflation is going to force you to take on more debt, and you're only a paycheck away from losing your home and being evicted. And the time to take action is now, guys. And I would highly recommend that if you're one of these people, look into a blue collar trade work, such as becoming a welder, electrician, or plumber, or even becoming a truck driver, getting your CDL. But the time to act is now, guys, because inflation, when it goes up and up, and your wages, if they don't increase with the cost of inflation, you're only going to be left behind, and you're going to have to go further and further in the hole just to make it. And there's another statistics I want to read to you guys. So annual buy now, pay later transaction volume has exploded to reach a record $116 billion in 2025. And that would be double the 2022 total, and 7 times higher than it was in 2020, guys. So that the data right there tells you that so many people are having to rely on buy now, pay later. And if that's you guys, if you're having to, split your payments and you can't afford gas or groceries, I hope that that's a wake-up call. When you have to press split payments into 4 so that you can just get by that week, I hope that really wakes you up, and you guys decide to do something and change your life for the better, and go back to school or do whatever you guys got to do. And once again, guys, I'm so sorry to keep on having to repeat myself, but if that's you, where you can't even afford a tank of gas and you have to split it into 4 payments, you have to start taking action now, because inflation is going to get a lot worse, and you don't want to wait until then to do something about it. And like I said earlier, look into bettering your life by going back to school, getting into a trade, or even getting your CDL. If you guys don't know my story, I used to be an accountant, and I got my CDL and became a truck driver. You can make very good money in the trucking industry, and I would highly recommend anybody that wants to give it a try to give it a try, because life's not going to get easier, and you need to take immediate action now. And I just want to stress to anybody that's using, buy now, pay later, that you don't use it unless you absolutely have to, because all that does is kick the can down the road. You're still going to have to owe that money. And I believe when you choose to use that option, that money will go right back into your account immediately, but you owe that balance later on down the road. And most people forget, and once your debt grows and those payments become due, you're going to have to continue to use that option, and your debts are just going to grow and grow. And you don't want to be in that situation, especially if you're not doing anything to increase your income. You're just going to get further down the hole in debt. So guys, hopefully you guys learned something today. Hope everybody's doing well out there. And and shout out to all my truck drivers, living that deaf life. The country wouldn't run without you guys. So, shout out to all you guys out there. And I hope a lot of you guys make the decision to get your CDLs or, you know, something else to better your life. But please don't fall behind and get, you know, stuck in that buy now pay for later debt trap. So all right guys, hopefully you guys have a good week. I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace.